Welcome to Notable Approvals. I'm attorney Amanda Shaffer. I've been pretty busy over here, so I haven't done one of these in about a week or so. But we're back, and we got some more exciting cases to talk about today. Just so I don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram so that you don't miss any more of our lives. So, and one more thing to remind you about. Tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be having our 5th episode of Are You Smarter Than a Naturalized Citizen, where we're going to have 2 more immigration attorneys, one American-born, Wayne Dapser, versus an Irish-born, so a naturalized citizen, Elaine Martin. It's going to be a lot of fun. The first 4 episodes were, especially if you're watching and you're going to be taking your naturalization test soon. We invite you to tune in. If you go to our Facebook page, there's an event page. But if you like us on Facebook or Instagram, you'll see it. You'll see it live. So let's get to our case today. So our case today is about a client who is a native and citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. This case has been going on for a while. We first met this client in 2017. Before I get to his immigration history, I'll quickly explain what happened with his wife. So he met his wife back in 2011. They were both at a restaurant and they started talking. And it turned out that his wife, although she was born in the US, was also from Trinidad. So they exchanged numbers, started dating, and in 2012, they moved in together. Later in 2012, she gave birth to their daughter. Now, one important thing that'll come up later with this case is that they weren't married when their daughter was born, and depending on the state that you live in, most states require at least, if you're either the parents be married or so an acknowledgement of paternity, or an order from courts declaring who the father is. So because he wasn't there, and because they weren't married, the wife couldn't put his name on the birth certificate, which he felt, thank you, Chris, thank you for watching, which, he is frustrating, but with most states, within a certain period of time, if you need to amend the birth certificate to put the father's name on it, then it's not a problem. I don't know, this was in Maryland, I'm not sure how long they do it. New York, maybe it's a year, but there's each state you have to look for how long you have to make little changes like that. Otherwise, you have to go through a whole process, go to a court, get the order that you're the father, then go send it to the register and have them fix it. So, and I'll get to what happened with that shortly, but they did have a baby together. They then did get married in 2013, and she petitioned for him. And their marital problems began in around 2015. And as with many relationships, it started with money issues. Because my client did not have legal status yet, he was having trouble getting a job. And his wife was not too thrilled about it. She would follow him around the house and tell him that he wasn't allowed to watch her TV or eat her food because she paid for it and he didn't. She would humiliate him in public for the same reasons. And because of these fights over money, she would throw things, slam doors. And he even had to, for a few nights, sleep out in his van because she was screaming and threatening to call the police, and he had nowhere else to go. So because of all of this turmoil, I have a friend in New York, because he was down in Maryland at the time, who could help him find a job. So he went up to New York, and his friend was able to help him, and he was able to find a job for 5 days a week. So 5 days a week, I think it was Monday through Friday, he'd be up in New York at his job, then he'd go back for the weekend to be with his wife and his daughter. And this continued for a while. And things started to improve when he was bringing in some money, but unfortunately, it wasn't just money that was a problem. It was the relationship that was a problem. So in 2016, his wife and his daughter came up to New York to go to a friend's barbecue, and she got a little too drunk. She wanted to leave because it was like her birthday too. and he wanted to stay. So she tried to stop the party by shutting the music off, started humiliating him in front of all his friends, was following him around, slapping him in the back, and started to threaten to deport him, to call the police on him. You know, all of these things that if you've seen any of our other lives on these abuse cases, it all starts to sound alike, because it is. I mean, these are very similar threats that you hear. There's a pattern that you'll see form. So, you know, basically, oh yeah, and then she also started threatening, this is a big one, so to take his daughter away and that he would never see her again. Now, I mentioned earlier something about the daughter and the birth certificate. And the reason I made a point of it then was what ended up happening when, after the daughter was born, you know, he was very excited. He said, let's put my name on the birth certificate. I'm the father. And she said, yeah, you're the father, but it's a privilege, not a right, to be on a birth certificate. And he didn't know, which is not true. It is not. If it is the right of the biological parent to be on the birth certificate. So he, you know, not knowing what, you know, being here without legal status, not knowing what the law was, he didn't know that he could fix that. In fact, we even submitted the birth certificate for the daughter as part of our evidence, showing the mom's name and no name listed as father, because it was his daughter, but she was using that as a tool to control him. Basically, you don't get to do it unless you don't get to put your name on here unless you do what I tell you or what I like. And then his final straw was when she told the daughter, that who's 4 years old now, that he was not her father, which again wasn't true. But the daughter, she didn't know. And the daughter went up to him and said, Mommy said you're not my daddy. And that just crushed him. And then she actually, after that party in 2016 where she flipped out, she disappeared again. And what happened was, in 2017, he got a Stokes interview notice. That's the interview where you and your spouse will be separated, ask the same questions, and then, you know, the questions are compared. It's generally the second interview that you have with USCIS. So he called us in 2017. He's like, I'm in New York. This is in Maryland. And we said to him, well, you know, I could go to Maryland, but I have to drive down there. It's going to cost a little bit more. He wanted us to come. We ended up transferring the case back to New York because now he lives in New York. But I had to go down there, and it was very important that I went down there because I was able to keep his green card application open. So we went down. His wife did not attend. We talked about it, and I was like, look, if your wife has been gone for 6 months, then she's not going to an Stokes interview with her now isn't going to go over well. And so, you know, and after he told us everything that had happened, we told him, you know what, this sounds like extreme cruelty. There is even some physical abuse with the slapping and the throwing of things, like, and slamming things. So I went down there with him. I drove down there, and we told the officer, he's filing for VAWA. The wife isn't coming. Can you please keep the application open? Because otherwise you have to file a new Form I-485, pay a new filing fee, which I don't remember when it changed, but it was either $12.25 or $11.70, and it may go up. So the difference for me driving down there was less than that. It was, and then there's all the legal work that goes into it as well, of course. Now, I've done this many times with people where they have a marriage interview coming up. They're having some serious and very problematic issues in their relationship, not just regular marital problems, but things that people who love each other shouldn't do to one another. And, you know, we always have discussion. Do we try to convince the other spouse to come to the interview if there really isn't any physical abuse, even though that's not necessarily the right way to think about it, but we have this, we always have this conversation. Or do we say, okay, look, VAWA is the right way to go. You qualify for this. So after our conversation with him, it became clear that her behavior was not just her being mean or a bad wife. It was really just being extremely cruel to him. And, you know, the way he used his daughter for me was kind of the kicking point, because his name's not on the birth certificate. In order for him to see his daughter now, he would have to go to court, petition for custody or visitation. First have to prove he was the dad and like go through a whole thing. And now the daughter doesn't think he's her dad. And, that's just heartbreaking. When someone uses children like that, that certainly can be an indication of extreme cruelty. And they had plenty of bona fide marriage evidence. When we submitted the VAWA, you have to resubmit any good faith marriage evidence. So they had joint taxes, they had joint lease, joint bank accounts, joint car insurance. He even had Western Union receipts for when he was up in New York for work. He would send money down to take care of his wife and his child. And so all this was great evidence, some affidavits, some pictures, of course. So we had a lot of great good faith marriage evidence. But of course, with VAWA, you also have to show abuse evidence. That's a little harder in a case with extreme cruelty, because when there's no physical abuse, you don't necessarily have a hospital record. You might not have a police report. You might not have an order of protection. But the good news is for VAWA, you don't need any of that. So in this situation, he did go to a psychologist at many times. We got a letter from the doctor. We had his very detailed statement about what happened. Again, we did submit his daughter's birth certificate as backup. And then we had a couple of his friends or family that had observed the way she treated him write affidavits for us. And we also, I forgot to mention earlier, he also has 2 sons with someone else who lived in New York. Those 2 sons were also being petitioned for by his wife. So fortunately with VAWA, we were able to keep their green card applications open as well, because they're dependents on the VAWA. So once he was granted VAWA, his 2 kids under 18 were also granted VAWA and will be able to get their green card just like he will. That will take a little longer. Now, I told you 2017 was when this all happened. You might wonder, well, why did it take so long? It's a good question. Well, the office that his application was at was notoriously slow with everything. With change of addresses, they were backed up. They were known to be backed up for like a year. And I've said I've done this before for other clients where I've gone with them to the interview to change over their applications so it didn't get denied. And when I've done that, I've had different responses from officers. I never had anyone say no, which is good. But I've had ones I've had probably 40-60. 40% said you have 30 days to submit it. 60% said, okay, submit it. Sometimes you get a little long, like a 60-day period, whatever the time period is, you have to submit it within that time period, or your application is going to get denied. You could still file, but you're going to have to start over. And that costs money and obviously takes a lot of time off. So in his situation, the officer didn't give us a deadline. And then, we transferred the file to New York, so I'm sure that took a long time. So my client was never rushing to get me the documents, but it was less so on his end as on USCIS's end, that it just seemed to take them forever to get the file up here. But the good news is he finally did get approved. That's the hard part. He has no criminal history, no inadmissibilities. He entered with, even though for VAWA you don't need to enter with a visa, he entered with a visa. So he and his son should have no problem getting their green cards now. But whenever you have an extreme cruelty case, especially when the victim is a man, there's always a bigger obstacle to climb. And because of the way society views domestic violence, unfortunately, still. But in this case, like I said, it really came down to the fact that we described in great detail what this abuse was like. And the things that he was describing was extremely cruel. Like I said, you have the threats of deportation and police, you hear that a lot. That's still extremely cruel in my mind, but you hear that a lot. But the way she used their daughter, that was really extreme. So at this point, our client is now waiting to get his interview notice for his green card, or maybe just his green card. That would be fantastic. And then he will have a 10-year green card. And then because it's a VAWA, his wife is a U.S. citizen. 3 years later, he will be eligible for citizenship. So that is all today for notable approvals. If you're having any issues in your marital relationship and you're wondering if you are a victim of extreme cruelty or of any type of physical violence and you need help, especially with your immigration case, our phone number or email has been scrolling across the bottom of your screen. Please do not hesitate to contact us. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Are You Smarter Than a Naturalized Citizen? Episode number 5. See if the naturalized citizen or the American-born citizen will answer 10 questions on the naturalization test correct first. It's a lot of fun. We hope that everyone watching out there can join us. Thank you all for watching, and I should be back tomorrow if I have time for another notable approval. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow night. Have a great one.